Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Avocation. In this video we're going to be modeling a castle, continuing our series on learning how to do 3D animation in Blender. So if you haven't checked out our previous videos, you can click the link below to learn that as we will be building on the skills that we learned last time. So this course comes from an online course that you can follow along. The link will be in the description below. And so if you want to follow the PDF form or see other tutorials by the same author, then you can feel free to do that. With that being said, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is begin building the castle walls. So we're going to open up Blender and right click on the 3D cube, then hit X and delete it. Next, we're going to go to top view by either pressing numpad 7 or going down to the view option in the bottom of the 3D viewer, pressing top. After that, we're going to hit N to open up properties panel if it isn't open already, and scroll down to where it says 3D cursor and set all three values to 0. Next, scroll down in that 3D panel to where it says display and change the grid lines to 100. Now right click on the camera and then hold down shift and then right click on the lights and press M and then move them to the last layer, which is layer 20. So we've moved them out of our way so that when we're modeling, they're not interfering with what we're doing. They still exist, so we can easily bring them back when we need them, but since we don't need them for a while, then they're just sort of there. So now go into top view if you're not in it already, and hit Shift A and add a plane object. Next, go into the properties panel, which is on the right hand side of the display, and scroll up to where it says rotation and change the X rotation to 90 degrees. Next, go into front view by either pressing 1 or going down to the view and selecting front. And now make sure that you're in orthographic view by either hitting numpad 5 on the number pad or going into view and selecting, I believe it's change perspective / orthographic. You can check in the top left hand corner of the screen whether it says perspective or orthographic. So next, make sure that the plane is selected and hit tab on the keyboard to enter edit mode. Within edit mode, press A once or twice to make sure all the vertices and faces are selected, and press X and select only faces. So now all we're left with is vertices and edges. Now you can tab back into object mode by hitting tab again on your keyboard and go into the properties panel and change the dimensions to 1 by 9.5. And now in the properties panel, which is again on the right hand side, change the X rotation to 90 degrees under the rotation option. Now go back into top view by pressing numpad 7 on your keyboard, press tab to go into edit mode, then press E to extrude, press X so it locks it along the X axis, and then press 16 and then left click. This will move the extruded vertices out 16 units. Next, press the A key to deselect all the vertices, then press Z to go into wireframe mode. This allows you to see through the objects and select all vertices as opposed to just the ones in front. Now, go to front view by pressing numpad 1 on your keyboard. Again, make sure that you're in orthographic view, not in perspective view. This is where it'll really make a difference when we move further throughout the video. Next, go into edge select mode by hitting the edge button in the bottom of the 3D viewport, and then select one of the top edges along the object. Now, with that selected, press Ctrl E. This will bring up a menu, then select Edge Ring. What this does is it selects all the edges along that particular face. You can see this for yourself by rotating the view by holding down the middle mouse button and panning around. This edge ring we don't really need this edge ring right now, but we'll be using it later on in the lesson, so just to give you that skill for now. So now, go back into front view and by pressing numpad 1 on the keyboard and hit Control R. So now move your mouse until you get a purple line vertically up and down the object. You can left click it once to accept it, and then you can drag it left and right, so drag it to the right as I've done, and then hit left click again, finalize it. So with this edge loop selected, place it exactly by going down in the properties panel to under where it says transform, and then the top of that is median, and the first one is the X value, so set that to 15. And also make sure that the median is set to global, not local. Press the A key to deselect the vertices, and now we're going to go into vertex selection mode. So you hit that at the bottom of the 3D viewer, there's a little button where it says vertex select. So now go into top view by hitting numpad 7 and box select with the B key the 2 top vertices on the right hand side. Next we're going to hit E to extrude, then Z to lock it to the Z axis, then -32, and this will extrude it 32 units. Now press the A key to deselect all the vertices, then tab to leave edit mode and go into object mode. Then we can see what we've just done. So if you hold down the middle mouse button and drag around, you can see it more dimensionally. And now press Z to leave wireframe mode and go into solid shading mode so you can actually see the objects. So what we've just created is the right wall of the castle. So now go into right side view, which is numpad 3, then wireframe mode with Z, and tab into edit mode and switch the selection thing to edge select. Next, select one of the top edges of the wall. Now Control E to select all 4 sides, and now Control E to bring up the menu, and then edge ring, which will select all 4 sides for us. And now Control R to subdivide, left click once to accept it, and then change in the median panel on the right, in the properties panel, change the Y value to 31.5. And again, make sure that it's global. Next, press the A key to deselect all the edges, and then go back to vertex select. So now go into top view with numpad 7, then box select with B, and left click and drag over the top 2 vertices on the left. Next, press E to extrude, press -47, then hit enter, and this will extrude the vertices 47 units. Press the A key to deselect all the vertices, and select one of the top edges, and then hit Control E, edge ring, and then we're going to hit Control R, and we can place our subdivide thing vertically. So now left click once to accept it, and then in the X median, make sure it's set to global, and set it to -31. Now press the A key to deselect, then box select, and box select the bottom left 2 vertices. Then hit E to extrude, and then -32, which will extrude it -32 blender units. Next we're going to hit one of the next we're going to switch into edge select, so go ahead and do that, and then we're going to hit Control E, then edge ring, and then we're going to hit Control R, big surprise, and have a horizontal line running across the wall. Then in the properties panel, we're going to hit the median, go underneath the median tab, and change the Y value to 0.5. Again, make sure it's global. Next, we're going to hit A to deselect all the edges, then B, and then select the bottom right 2 vertices. Press E to extrude, and then -15. So this creates the perimeter for our castle. Now you can press A to deselect all the vertices. So now we can tab into edit mode and press Z to enter solid shading mode. And now if you pan around, you can see what exactly we've done. So in case you're wondering, the opening is for the gatehouse, which we'll be adding at a later time. So with the object selected in the properties panel, go ahead and name it Castle Walls. So now you can save your Blender file, and I'm going to name it castle.blend. So with the object still selected, go into the left hand side, under where it says origin, hit origin to geometry. This will place the center of the object in the center of where all the geometry is, if that kind of makes sense. We'll be looking into this a little bit more later. So now in the properties panel, under where it says 3D cursor, change the location of the 3D cursor to 0, 0, and 0. Now hit Shift S, which is snap, and then say object to 3D cursor. This will put the object origin right in the middle of our project. So one last thing, so hit top view, so go into top view by hitting numpad 7, then Z, and then edit mode so we can change it, and then box select the two left vertices from where we started next to the opening, and then we're going to hit F to fill the face, then A to deselect everything, and then tab to go back into object mode. You can save the project by hitting Control S or Command S if you're on a Mac, and now we are going to start on the catwalk. Okay, so now we're going to begin working on the catwalk. First, go into front view by pressing numpad 1 on the keyboard, then go into edit mode by hitting tab, and then Z to enter wireframe mode. Next, box select all of the top vertices on the castle. Then press E to extrude and -0.5, which will extrude them up 0.5 Blender units. Next, press the A key to deselect all the vertices, then press numpad 3 to go into right side view. Next, box select the top 2 rows of vertices on the left hand side. So now extrude by pressing E and then -1, which will form the base for our catwalk. So now press A to deselect the vertices and then pan your screen over. I believe it's Shift middle mouse button to pan, and then do the same thing on the other side. Now press A to deselect the vertices, go into front view with numpad 1, and do the same thing that we did for the left and the right side of the castle on the front and the back. This will be on the left and the right of your screen. So now deselect the vertices by pressing A, then tab to go into object mode, then Z to enter solid shading mode, and now you can rotate your display to see what we've done three-dimensionally. So now go into front view by pressing numpad 1, then tab into edit mode, then Z to enter wireframe mode, and then box select the entire 2 rows of vertices on the castle. Next, hit the P key on the keyboard and then click separate. So what this does is it takes all the vertices that we selected, in this case the catwalk, and puts it into a new object so that we can name it and add a material to it separately later on. So now we're going to name the object catwalk, and you can do that in the right hand side in the properties panel towards the bottom of that panel. You can also see this change in the outliner, which is in the top right hand side of your screen, of the window. Now with the catwalk still selected, we're going to go onto the left hand side, the panel there, and under origin, click origin to geometry. And now we're going to save the file with Control S, or on a Mac, Command S. So next, we're going to add the cornice blocks. So select the catwalk object, tab into edit mode, and then rotate the display so you can see the left side of the front wall of the castle. Next, select the edge select button, and then select one of the top edges of the wall. Then click Control E and then go into Edge Ring. And with these edges selected, click Subdivide in the left-hand panel 3 times. what this does is it splits up that piece into 7 pieces. So now switch to face select and then select every other face along the top of the catwalk. You may find this easier to switch into solid shading mode by pressing Z so that you don't select the bottom faces, as that can sometimes happen. With these faces selected, press E and then -1, which will form the blocks which we will use a bit later. So now let's have a look at what we've done. So tab out of edit mode, and if you're still in wireframe mode, press Z to switch to solid shading mode, and then you can rotate your display to see exactly what we've done. At this point, I would recommend that you save your file, Control S on Windows, Command S on a Mac. So now repeat this process for the other front catwalk on the right hand side of the castle. So now do the same thing on the back side of the castle, except this time you'll need to click the subdivide button 4 times as opposed to 3. The upper right hand block may be a bit larger than the others, but that won't be an issue, so don't worry about it. Next, do the same thing for the left and right side of the castle, and you'll need to subdivide that side 4 times. Next, go into front view, make sure you're in vertex select, which you can check at the bottom of the 3D viewport. Then make sure that you're in wireframe mode and you're still looking at the catwalk object, and make sure you're in edit mode. Next, box select the top 2 rows of vertices. Again, press P to separate by selection, and then you can name this object Cornice Blocks. At this point, I would recommend that you save your Blender file. So now we're going to begin modeling the towers. So now go back into object mode by pressing tab on the keyboard if you aren't in there already, and then press numpad 7 to go into top view. Place your 3D cursor in the top right hand corner of the object by left clicking in that spot, and now hit Shift A and add a plane object, and then change the dimensions in the properties panel on the right hand side to 6 by 6. Next, go to front view by pressing numpad 1 on the keyboard, then use the blue, green, and red arrows to move the object into place at the bottom of the castle. So now tab into edit mode and press A once or twice to make sure all the vertices are selected. Now press E and then extrude approximately 1 Blender unit up. And now we're going to be extruding again, so press E with these vertices still selected, then go a little bit more than 1 Blender unit, and then press S on the keyboard. And we're just going to scale them in a bit as I've done. So now with these vertices still selected, press E to extrude and then move them up approximately 4 Blender units. Then extrude it again and about half a Blender unit, and then press S and scale it up as shown. Now extrude them up a little bit more and then a little bit more again, then press S and scale them back approximately to the same width as the long part of our tower. And now press E to extrude and extrude it until it's in the middle of our catwalk, which we created earlier. Now extrude it up to where the cornice blocks are, and then press S and scale them out a bit as shown. Now use the blue arrow with these top vertices selected and move them down to about halfway to about the midpoint of the cornice blocks where we made the last extrusion. So now press E to extrude and then left click as opposed to moving them, and then scale them down a bit approximately to where the long part was again, and then move them up ever so slightly with the blue arrow. Now press E to extrude and extrude them up approximately 10 Blender units. So now extrude it up a bit more and then press S and scale it out a bit as shown. And now extrude it approximately 3 to 4 Blender units again as shown. So now press A to deselect all the vertices, then tab to go back into object mode, then Z to enter solid shading mode, and now you can pan around and rotate to see what we've done so far. So with the tower selected, Press Origin in the left-hand side Properties panel, then Origin to Geometry. So now, name this tower Tower 1, which you can do in the right-hand side in the Properties panel, as we've done a couple of times. At this point, you can save your Blender file. So now we're going to do the Tower Cornice Blocks. We're not actually going to do it the same way that we made the previous Castle Cornice blocks, because I want to show you a different way of making them. So now go into Top View by pressing numpad 7 on the keyboard, and then press Z to go into wireframe view. Now you can zoom in a bit on the tower by scrolling in with the mouse wheel, and then press Shift and hold down the middle mouse button so you can pan around to adjust your display. Now select the tower with right click, and then press Shift S, and then snap the 3D cursor to selection. So this is going to put the 3D cursor at the origin of the object which we centered earlier. Now press Shift A and add another plane object. Go into front view by pressing numpad 1 on the number pad, and then use the blue arrow to move the plane we just created slightly above the tower as shown. Now press the S key and scale up the object to approximately the same size as the tower. So now in the outline editor, which is in the top right hand side of the window, click the little eye and hide the castle walls, catwalk, and the cornice blocks, and the tower. To note, these aren't gone, but they're just hidden temporarily, and they will still be included in the final render. Now, with the plane object selected, press Tab to go into edit mode, and then press Z to make sure you're in wireframe mode, if you're not already, and then press E and extrude it up the Z axis just a bit. Rotate your display a bit so that you can see it more dimensionally using the middle mouse button, and then click Ctrl R on your keyboard and move your mouse around a bit until you see a blue or purplish horizontal line. Next, before you click, you want to scroll your mouse wheel until you see 8 lines. Then left click twice to set them. And now we're going to do the same thing except in the other direction. So again, hit Ctrl R on your keyboard, and then scroll in with the mouse wheel until you see 8 lines, then left click twice, and that will set them in place. Next, press A to deselect any vertices that might be selected, and then switch to face select mode. So next, starting with a corner face, select every other face along the outside of the object on the top side. Make sure not to select any of the side faces or the bottom faces. Next, go into front view by pressing numpad 1 on the keyboard, and then press E and extrude them up to form our blocks. Now deselect with A and tab into object mode, and now name this object Tower 1 Cornice Blocks in the right hand side in the Properties panel. Now set this object's origin to geometry by going into the left hand panel, clicking Origin, and then Origin to Geometry. Now we're going to unhide all the objects that we hid before, so click on the eye, the grayed out eye in the outliner, and this will bring back all of the objects. Press Z to go into solid display mode and pan around so you can see what we've done so far. At this point, you can save your Blender file, again with Ctrl S on Windows, Command S on a Mac. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the towers and the cornice blocks on the towers. So next, select Tower 1. Make sure not to select Tower 1 Cornice Blocks, but the actual tower. Go into Top View by pressing numpad 7 on the keyboard, then press Alt-D on the keyboard, and now use the arrow to drag it over to the other side of the castle. What this does is it creates a duplicate, but it's a linked duplicate, meaning that if one changes, the other one is affected as well. So this will become handy when we go to add a texture to these towers. We only actually have to add the texture to one of them, and all the others will be applied automatically. So now name this duplicated tower Tower 2. So now go back to the Tower 1, again make sure not to select the cornice blocks, hit Alt D, and then move it down to the front right hand side of the castle, and then name this duplicated object Tower 3. So now go back to either Tower 3 or Tower 2, which is the duplicated objects, and then duplicate them by Alt D, one of them by clicking Alt D, and then move it down to form the fourth corner of our tower. And then name this duplicated object Tower 4. So now we're going to select Tower 1 cornice blocks, hit Alt D, and then you guessed it, move it over to our Tower 2, and name it Tower 2 cornice blocks. Now repeat the same process for Tower 3 and 4. Now deselect with A, and then by pressing A on the keyboard once or twice, and then press Z to go back into solid shading view if you're not there already, and then you can see the tower more dimensionally by rotating with the middle mouse button. At this point, I would recommend that you save your Blender file, Control S, Command S, you get the idea. So up next, because we're almost done, we're going to create the gatehouse. So the first thing you need to do is center your cursor. So in the right hand side in the properties panel, change the 3D cursor location to 0, 0, and 0. Now go to front view by pressing numpad 1 on the keyboard, press Shift A on the keyboard, and then add a new plane object, and set the dimensions to 20 in the X-axis and 10 in the Y-axis. Now rotate the plane by hitting R, then X to lock it to the X-axis, and then click 90 degrees. So now go into top view by hitting numpad 7 on the keyboard, and then with the plane that will become our gatehouse still selected, then use the translate arrow to move it slightly in front of the castle walls. Now go into front view and press Shift S, cursor to selected, which will put the 3D cursor in the middle of our plane object. Now press Shift A to add, and this time add a circle object, and then rotate it by pressing R, then X to lock it to the X-axis, and then press 90. Now in the properties panel on the right hand side, change both the X and Y scale values to 3. Now with the circle selected, press Tab to enter to go into edit mode, and then press A once or twice to deselect any vertices that might be selected, and then switch into vertex selection mode, which you can either do at the bottom or the shortcut is Control Tab. Next, press B to do box select, and then box select the bottom half of the circle. Now press the X key and delete the vertices. Now select the two bottom vertices on the left and the right hand side of the circle, and press E to extrude and move them down along the Z axis so that they line up with the bottom of the castle wall. Okay, so now tab back into object mode. So now we're going to tab into edit mode on the plane. Press A once or twice until all vertices are selected, then hit X and then delete faces. Now press A once or twice to deselect all the vertices, and then select only the bottom two vertices and press X and delete edges. This leaves the other three edges intact, but only gets rid of the edge between those two vertices. You'll see why very shortly. Now tab into object mode, select the plane and the circle by holding down Shift and clicking on both of them, and now press Ctrl J, which will join the two objects together into a single object. Now with this new object selected, press Tab to go into edit mode, and then select the bottom two vertices on the left hand side and press F to fill in a face, and then the two bottom press A to deselect them, and then repeat the same process on the right side. So now we need to add a face to the object. So press A to select everything while still in edit mode, and then press Alt F, which will fill in that face. Now deselect the vertices by pressing A, then tab back into object mode and name this object Gatehouse. So now you can rotate your display to see it more three-dimensionally, and if you want, you can go into solid shading mode by pressing Z on the keyboard. So moving right along, we are going back into wireframe mode, so press Z on the keyboard, select the gatehouse if it isn't selected already, then hit tab to go into edit mode, and then press A once or twice to select everything. Next, go into top view by hitting numpad 7, and then press E and extrude everything out as shown. Next, press tab to go into object mode, and then press Z to enter solid shading mode so you can see what we've done so far. So you may notice that the inside of the gatehouse, inside of the arch, doesn't look as smooth as we'd like it. So in order to do this, we're going to go back into edit mode within the gatehouse, so make sure it's selected, then press tab to go into edit mode, press 1 to go into front view, then Z, make sure you're in wireframe mode, this is where it really matters, and then B to box select, and box select the arch. In the panel on the left hand side, click this smooth button once. Now press tab to go back into object mode, and you can rotate and Z to go into solid shading mode, and now you can see that the inside of the arch is smooth exactly the way we want it. So now we're going to add some blocks to the bottom of the gatehouse. So go back into front view by hitting numpad 1, and then go into edit mode for the gatehouse, then select the bottom left hand vertice, and then Shift S, cursor to selection. Next, go to top view by hitting numpad 7 on the keyboard, tab out of edit mode, and then press Shift A and add a new plane. Now select this plane object which we just created, tab into edit mode, and then select the top two vertices by right-clicking on one, then shift, then right-clicking on holding down shift, and then right-clicking on the other, and move them down using the green arrow as shown. With these same two vertices selected, press E to extrude, then Y to lock it to the Y axis, and then move them up as shown. Now select the right-hand objects along the plane that we started out with, and then press E to extrude, and extrude them out as shown. Now extrude them out again as shown, and then select the top two objects from that last extrusion and extrude them up again as shown. And now press Z to go into solid shading mode, and then edit, and then tab to go into object mode, and now you can zoom around to see that we've just created an object that goes all the way around the outside of the gatehouse. Now go into wireframe mode by hitting Z on the keyboard, then tab to go into edit mode, then go into front view by hitting numpad 1 on the keyboard, and then press E to extrude and move them up a bit as shown. After you have done that, then press E again and move them up about half as much. So while still in edit mode, press Z to go into solid shading mode, and then select two vertices at a time and move them in until they meet with the wall. So what I would recommend doing is doing the left side, the left, the front, and the right side, and then waiting to do the corners last, and with the corners, do each one individually by pressing the G key and moving them into place. Now we're going to tab out of edit mode and back into object mode, and name this object that we just created Gatehouse Base Left. At this point, I would recommend saving your Blender file. So now what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the left side of this base and move it over to the right side, so that when one is affected, then so is the other. So select the Gatehouse left base, then press Alt-D, and then use the arrow to move it over to the other side of the gatehouse. So notice that the right side has to be a mirror of the left side. So in order to do this, go into the Properties panel on the right-hand side of the window and change the X scale from 1 to -1. And now name this duplicated object Gatehouse Base Right. And once again, you can save your Blender file. So we are so close to being done. But first we are going to create the Gatehouse Cornice Blocks. So far we've explored two methods of creating the cornice blocks. One for the walls of the castle, the other for the towers, and now we're going to explore a third way. So the first thing we're going to do is go into top view by hitting numpad 7 on the keyboard, then Z to go into wireframe mode, and place your 3D cursor in the lower left hand side of the gatehouse as shown. Next hit Shift A and add a cube object. In the right hand side, change the dimensions to 1 by 1 by 1. Now we're going to go into front view by hitting numpad 1 on the keyboard and use the blue arrow to drag the cube up to the top of the gatehouse object. In the Properties panel, which is just underneath the outliner, click on the one that looks like a wrench, which is the Modifiers add-on, and add an Array modifier. So now leave everything as is, but check the Constant Offset checkbox and change the X value for that to 2.22. The other thing we're going to change is in the Count section of the Array modifier, change the count number to 10. So this creates a number of blocks, but they're still marked as one object. So now name this object Gatehouse Cornice Blocks. So now we can save our Blender file once more and create a ground plane. So now go into front view and then press Z to go into wireframe mode if you're not already, and then press A to select all the objects and move the objects up until the bottom of the castle appears to be on the red line of the grid. Now on the right side of the window in the properties, in the 3D editor viewport it's called, change the 3D cursor location to 0, 0, and 0. Next, go into top view by pressing numpad 7 and then add Shift A and add a plane object. With this plane object still selected, change the dimensions to 100 by 100. In the Properties panel, which is found on the right hand side, which we have been using throughout this tutorial, in case you haven't figured that out already, change under the position part, change the Z value to 0.1. And name this, also in that toolbar, name this object ground. So now go back into solid display if you're not already in there by pressing Z on the keyboard, and you can turn around and you can rotate and pan the camera to see all that we've done so far. This concludes our video. At this point, I would recommend that you save this file, as we will be coming back to it in part 2, where we get into materials and texturing. So stay tuned for that. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. Anything else, or maybe your questions and comments, feel free to head over to our forum. Again, links are down below. And thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.